From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. It's great to be with you at a normal hour. After a week in Las Vegas on the West Coast, doing the show at like 6 a.m. and having to get up really early to do it, it's nice to be able to do it at 9 a.m. Eastern. So good morning. Thank you all for tuning in. And for all of those people on the West Coast, I know I've said it every single day, but thank you for tuning in. Really, really, really appreciate it because it's really early. So without further ado, we've got a packed show for all y'all today. I've highlighted today's show as kind of being the breach Monday before the patch Tuesday, because later on today, here just an hour or so after we end the show, the patch Tuesday patches will start dropping from Microsoft and everyone else throughout the day. They'll start kind of rolling out for all of that. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Nudge Security. You'll hear more from them later on the show. And now join me for a coffee cup cheers, because I've got my favorite espresso on the planet, the ones I make. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. It's so good to have a cup of coffee. All right, let's go ahead and start off with another victim of last year's Move It hack coming forward. This is Wisconsin's Physicians of Service Insurers Corporation, also known as WPS. They're notifying roughly 950,000 individuals that their personal information was stolen as part of that breach. Now, we knew that there were about 2,000 victims of the Move It breach software vulnerability that allowed attackers to get access to essentially the entire database. According to MCSoft, close to 2,800 organizations were affected. Now, on September 6th, they've revealed that they were impacted by the Move It hack, announcing that 946,801 Medicare beneficiaries in the U.S. were likely affected, including some centers for Medicare and Medicaid services. The notification letter explains that part of the investigation didn't find any evidence that an unauthorized party obtained copies of the files that were within the Move It application. However, a second investigation discovered that files were indeed stolen. So now you ask yourself, what's going on there? So there are two plausible scenarios as to why their initial investigation didn't show it, and the second one did. First, they may have not seen the exfiltration of the data. They may have not known where all the data is, and so they assumed that they weren't victims. However, likely they employed some threat intel. They're likely monitoring dark web sources, and they may have seen this data come back up. When they saw the data come back up in May, they engaged a different third party that said, these guys told us nothing happened a year ago. Can you tell us? Because now this data is online and there's no other way to get it but this way. So they likely relaunched a forensic investigation with a different third party. That forensic investigation knew exactly where to go looking because they've seen the data out there. And you can obviously at that point really start piecing the pieces together and go looking for it. Whenever you're going through this types of incident, one thing that's really, really important to tell, and I know some people may, you could talk about negligence. There's a lot of arguments that could be made here, but it's a needle in a haystack if you don't have good data management. And most organizations don't have good data management, meaning their data is all over the place. It's not in just one spot. Multiple teams use it in multiple different places and multiple different ways. Different business units could use the same tools across a whole slew of different use cases. And so if you don't have good data inventory, you will likely end up in a situation very similar to what WPS is in. So now, almost a year and 4 months after the Move It zero-day exploit, 2,800 victims approximately, they're finally coming forward saying we also are a victim of the Move It zero-day exploit. Payment gateway provider Slim CD is now disclosing a data breach that compromised credit card and personal data belonging to 1.7 million individuals. The notification says attackers had access to its network for nearly a year between August of 2023 and June of 2024. Slim provides payment processing solutions for electronic and card payment via web-based terminals, mobile, and desktop apps. They detected suspicious activity on June 15th. They've also discovered that when they discovered that activity has been in their environment for nearly 10 months at the time. The type of data that was accessed by the threat actors was full name, physical address, credit card number, and payment card expiration date. Now, you might ask yourself, aren't they PCI required and compliant, meaning none of that data should have been plain text? Yes. It appears that data was either plain text or wasn't secured properly, because there's no reason that you would have access to that data. In the credit card processing realm, when you tap, swipe, insert your card in any sort of payment terminal, it's supposed to essentially send an API that validates that you have the money, right? To a payment center. Validates that you got it. That all happens in microseconds, like milliseconds, like fast, right? As fast as you are, click, money's there, done, right? That credit card information at that point is hashed in the API, and then it's coming back hashed as well with just the last four and the expiration. That's proper PCI DSS hygiene. In this case, it appears that that's not the case. It looks like it, although they would have been violating PCI standards, meaning when was the last PCI audit they did? Who did it? And were these not, was it not visible there? So we'll see. They say that the CVV wasn't there. And by the way, just so y'all know, most of the time, the data when you swipe the card doesn't put in the CVV, just as an example, especially the chip cards. That's why your cards have a chip on them. Saying that reduces the risk is a flawed statement, all of within itself there as well. And just lets you know they're downplaying it. They're not taking it as seriously as they should be. Yesterday, we talked about the Sonicwall zero-day vulnerability, and now we know that the Akira Ransomware group has started exploiting this vulnerability in the Gen 5, Gen 6, and some versions of the Gen 7 firewalls. The attack activity has prompted CISO to add it to its KEV catalog, that's CVE 2024-40766. It's an improper access control bug in the Sonicwall. It was first disclosed on August 22nd. It was assigned a severity rating of 9.3. On Thursday night of last week, it kind of started hitting all the airwaves that there is an active exploit and a significant vulnerability, and it should be patched right away. We now know the threat actors, immediately upon obviously identifying that this vulnerability exists, started scanning for these devices, started looking for them, and developed an exploit to take advantage of them. We now know that's there, so you want to make sure you get those patched up right away. A threat actor linked to China has been targeting military-related satellite industries in Taiwan, according to Trend Micro. They've been tracking them under the name TID-Drone or TI Drone. Threat actor has been observed mainly targeting drone manufacturers. The group has relied on enterprise resource planning software and RDP to deploy sophisticated malware to disable system protections and steal information. The investigation discovered that ERP systems was present in the environment of different victims, suggesting the malware might be distributed through a supply chain attack, which is, again, top of mind there. The Chinese trying to steal that data. Obviously, they see huge, the drone market. I mean, look, if you don't believe me, the drone market's unbelievable, and I'll tell you why. The Houthis in Yemen have been training on operating explosive kamikaze drones for now 5-6 years. The Iranians have been doing it. The Iranians are supplying Russia. Russia's supplying Hamas. Was supposed to get them. They're not getting them, right? But we know a lot of the terror organizations. These drones are a new battlefield. They're very, very much a new battlefield, and a new threat. And so, not surprising there. And now, folks, a quick message from our friends over at Nudge Security. Thank you so much for their support of the program. Here it is. Do you know who's experimenting with AI in your organization? Our friends over at Nudge Security have come up with a patented approach for SaaS discovery, giving you a full inventory of all apps ever introduced by anyone in your organizations, and all in minutes. This includes Gen AI applications. The best part is you don't even have to know what you're looking for. You simply do a quick one-time setup, so easy, no change management required, no browser plugins, no network proxies, no agent. Nudge Security is going to discover and categorize every SaaS and cloud account ever created by anyone in your organization. You can get a free 14-day trial today. You'll get a full list of all Gen AI apps and users. You'll get insights into their security posture, compliance certification, breach history, and more, so you can quickly vet new AI tools and guide users towards a secure alternative. Take control of GenAI security risks today by going to nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub, nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub to start your free 14-day trial today. All right, we continue the show here. Go check out our friends over at Nudge Security. Really, it's an unbelievable tool. I've ran it multiple times. It's never disappointed. All right, here's the deal. The U.S., alongside several allies, are now accusing the Russian military of staging global critical infrastructure units through malicious cyber operations bent on espionage, sabotage, and reputational damage. They're deploying the Whispergate malware that they started using against Ukraine back in January of 2022, pre-Russian invasion into the Ukraine. So there's a few things to go with this. One, I say this because if you missed my LinkedIn post, I spent the last week as kind of Wednesday through Sunday at a SANS training in Las Vegas, Nevada, part of their network summit, part of their network security conference where they had the training. Great event, great class. I took a NERC SIP training in order to biff my knowledge up on NERC SIP requirements because it was fairly new for me. And I'll tell you this. The Russians, everything I kind of knew was reaffirmed, and I learned a whole lot of new stuff. But I'll tell you this. Everything Russia does against Ukrainian and then former CIS countries in terms of critical infrastructure will eventually or will be used against other organizations when the beck and call needs to happen, when they want to create that type of disruption, when they want to create the type of unrest, right? So there's an aspect to this that one has to take seriously, understanding that the Russians play around in critical infrastructure for a multitude of reasons. Will they take down a power line? No. Will they poke around? Yes. Will they have a back door for the day of, just flip a switch? Absolutely. So you really want to take these seriously. You really want to understand it, because the Russians don't test on America. They test on the Ukraine. They test on former CIS countries. They test on adversaries in Africa, in South America, and in other parts of Asia. And they kind of develop those skills. They kind of that's why we're so interested in it. That's why FBI, NSA, Cyber Command, whenever there's an attack, right, you do that. I mean, the Ukraine battlefield is a prime example of kind of understanding what capabilities the Russians have and what capabilities they don't have, and what they can defend against and what they can't defend against. It's a really back and forth battle there of trying to identify vulnerabilities within the entire infrastructure in order to cause and wreak havoc. It's a way to do that. That's what's happening there. So you want to be mindful of these groups. CISO, for their end, they're also now flagging, when it comes to industrial control systems, 2 new vulnerabilities that they've added to their KEV catalog. The vulnerabilities affect the Baxter's Connect Health portal and the Mitsubishi Electric's MELSAC line of PLCs. Programmable controllers are known as PLCs. So CISO's advisory contain information on both of those vulnerabilities. One of the vulnerabilities has been assigned a CVE 2024-679 or 5. It's been given a perfect score of 10 because it's a SQL injection issue that an unauthenticated attacker can leverage to run arbitrary SQL queries on the affected system. It's a really, really low complexity type of attack. The other vulnerability is CVE 2024-679 or 6. It's an improper access control. It's got an 8.2 CVSS rating, but it would allow an attacker to access sensitive patient and clinical information and modify or delete the data, therefore reaching data poisoning type of attacks. The Mitsubishi flaw, for their end, has been assigned to CVE 2020-5652. It's kind of been going on through the years. They kind of try to patch it. Every time they patch it, something else kind of comes along. So this is the latest version of it, and you want to make sure you get those patched. Mordechai Guri is a student at the Ben Gurion University in Israel, in Beersheba, in the Negev. And he used malware to encode sensitive data that can be captured from a distance using software-defined radio, hardware, and off-the-shelf antenna. The attack, nicknamed Rambo, would allow attackers to exfiltrate encoded files, encryption keys, images, keystrokes, and biometric information at a rate of up to 1,000 bits per second. Tests were conducted over a distance of up to 7 meters or 23 feet. So they'd have to have, you'd make James Bond cool again. But let me ask you this. This isn't very hard, right? If I knew this types of attack existed, because I know you're going to tell me it's not possible. Yes, it's not going to happen everywhere, but could it happen in sensitive places? Yes. If I put on a yellow vest and a hard hat and I stand within 5 meters of any sort of ICS environment, any sort of power generation facility, would anyone ask me a question? If you don't know how to answer that, understand how reliable this is. Now, the malware works on air-gapped systems. It can manipulate the RAM to generate modified encoded radio signals at clock frequencies, which can then be received from a distance. The attacker can use appropriate hardware to receive the electromagnetic signals, decode the data, and retrieve the stolen information if they wanted to steal it that way. So all your air-gapped networks no longer become air-gapped. Most of those air-gapped networks exist in oil and gas and energy. So there's that. A really, really great read by and great research by Mordechai Guri. Go check that out. The link is in the show notes. And finally, Poland security officials said yesterday that they foiled cyber attacks and online blackmail attempts by groups acting for Russian and Belarusian services. Poland registered up to 1,000 online attacks daily targeting government institutions and agencies, linking them to the country's support for neighboring Ukraine. By the way, Poland's been at the front and center of this, right? When you talk about Russia, Ukraine, you hear the U.S. supplying weapons and whatnot, but what the Polish military, what the Polish government, what the Polish people have done to their Ukrainian neighbors, and nothing is nothing more than admirable at minimum. One, they've opened up their borders, they've taken in a whole bunch of refugees from the Ukraine, helping them kind of settle in and withstand it. Number two, they've offered tremendous amount of support. Number three, Poland and Russia have a very, very long history. Go back to World War I, World War II, etc. The Poles don't like the Russians don't like the Poles. There's a whole history there. Also, one of the Polish prime ministers was on a visit to Russia when his plane crashed. Him and his entire, most of his cabinet and military personnel were all killed in that plane crash. There's a lot of distrust. Poland they see Russian aggression for what it is. A mark. They were victims of Poland aggression during World War II, right? I mean, Russia occupied Poland until the collapse of the Berlin Wall, and then in the fall of the Soviet Union, parts of Poland were occupied by the Russians. So, keeping that in mind, the Polish have done an unbelievable job here of putting a stop to the kind of work that the Russians are doing. They foiled over 400,000 attempted or successful attacks were recorded compared. So they're really dealing with the brunt force of this as well. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live here with all the latest and greatest. Tomorrow will be a special show. Obviously, we'll be marking the anniversary of the September 11th attacks. So give yourself a minute or two before we talk cyber tomorrow to talk about that. Until then, have a great rest of your day. Most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.